Hello and welcome to Lo-Fi Literary, where you could expect high-quality book reviews and low-quality camera resolution. Today we're going to talk about The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Ooh. Now, I have a lot of love for this book. It was a really fun read. Personally, I love books that center older women, especially moms, because I just feel like that's an underrepresented demographic, especially in horror and fantasy. I also love books about vampires, so for me this was like the best of both worlds. That said, there were a few annoying plot holes, and that's really what I'm going to focus my video on today. Alright, so plot hole number one has to do with a photograph of the vampire James Harris. This is not a spoiler-free review, so if you haven't read the book, go ahead and click off now. Alright, so when our main character Patricia gets her hands on a photograph of James Harris, her neighbor who she's long suspected is a vampire, she does have the option to, turn it into the police or, I don't know, show it to her husband. She decides instead to show it to her friend Slick, a member of her book club, which I don't think is a plot hole. I don't think it's a bad decision. Where the plot hole starts coming in is when Patricia leaves Slick for that evening. She's like, hey, I've got a photo of this guy, proves that he's like a supernatural creature, and instead of being like, let's go to the police right now, girl, she's all like, I'm just gonna leave this photo with you overnight so you can like kind of think on it, which is a dumb move, right? When the readers encounter that, they're thinking right away like, hey, don't leave your only piece of evidence with this girl or else it's gonna get disappeared, which is exactly what happens. So Slick, who up until this point, I want to mention, hasn't been like a tough chick, she hasn't been super confrontational, she decides to call James Harris and say, hey, I've got your photo, and I'm not gonna do a southern accent, but she's basically like, hey, I have this photo that proves that you've been alive and young since 1930. You better leave town or else I'm going to start telling the husbands, I'm going to start telling the cops because I have this piece of evidence. Now, like I said, I thought this was out of character for her. If you disagree, that's fine. You could let me know in the comments. So this gave the vampire the opportunity to go seize the photo, attack Slick, taking away their only piece of evidence, which, while it did, progress the storyline, it felt like sort of a pointless hurdle. Next plot hole has to do with the rats, and if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. So there's a pretty graphic scene where Patricia's mother-in-law and housekeeper are attacked by a giant horde of rats. Now, the mother-in-law is actually devoured by these rats, right? She's hospitalized and shortly thereafter passes away, while Mrs. Green is actually able to save herself, like lock herself into the bathroom or something. But regardless, Mrs. Green does bear witness, and the folks at the hospital do see that, hey man, there were like hundreds of rats that came in and ate this lady. Now, I don't know too much about like the climate of the South or the wildlife there, but I think if I heard that my neighbor, my friend, my mother-in-law was eaten by rats, that would raise some red flags for me, right? If my housekeeper was like, hey, hundreds of rats started flooding the room and just covered every imaginable surface, I'd be like, that seems weird, that seems a little, dare I say, supernatural. However, none of the other characters react like that. Now, I didn't need this scene to be taken out. I thought it was like gruesome and fun, but I would have liked at least like a paragraph maybe, just giving me some sort of explanation, right? I mean, the vampire guy, James Harris, is supposed to be like a landscaper, or else he claims that was one of his jobs, so he could have been like, oh yeah, with like the rains this season, you'll really see the rats coming up from the foundation of old houses like this, or whatever. The author could have made something up, but I did feel like I needed a little something to tell me why the other characters were just taking this situation so normally. Next plot hole is going to have to do with Francine. She is the vampire James Harris's housekeeper in the beginning of the book, as well as, I believe, his first victim in this story. Now, he kills her, and years later, Patricia discovers Francine's withered body in James Harris's attic. He never explains why he kept the body. We as the reader are never clued in on it either. Like Patricia doesn't have any theories, so it just seems like a plot hole that was like kind of glossed over. James is a guy who, you know, he's got his stuff in order. He seems like the kind of person that would have explanations and reasoning behind everything. The fact that we don't get any reasoning behind his choice to keep Francine's body does seem like a pretty big plot hole to me. Finally, this isn't so much a plot hole as just a point of frustration. Patricia's husband, Carter, let's talk about him. He is an a-hole. He is just an awful, cheating, gaslighting husband that the reader really grows to hate. And I know Southern culture can be a little different, especially like in the 80s and 90s, right? Like women stayed by their husbands. Being divorced was like pretty scandalous, so a lot of women just like didn't choose to go through that trouble. And to be fair, he was never like physically abusive, so I guess I could see the cultural reasoning behind it. However, I would have liked to kind of see more about why Patricia was staying with Carter. At the very beginning of the book, he's not that bad, but he's also not that great. I think if Hendricks, the author, put in just a little bit like about why she loved him and maybe gave us some scenes towards the very beginning that show us, you know, maybe they're like reminiscing on when they first met, or maybe Carter is kind of just like there for her in certain little ways that kind of diminish as their lives get more intense. I really would have seen Patricia's point of view more, but as is, that part just felt lacking. Again, Patricia was like a strong, intelligent woman, and I wasn't super clear on why she stayed with him. Okay, so that's it for this rundown of the big plot holes in the Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying. So again, I would actually recommend this book. It's a fun time, it's well written, it just has a few things that I think the editor should have caught and tweaked. But overall, hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more like it, go ahead and subscribe. If you'd like to be very nice to me, you could leave a comment or a like so this channel kind of gets off the ground. Alright, until next time.